Welcome to the House by Vegasor podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean.
Hello.
And on this episode, we'll be discussing the new movie from Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which is one of those movies where the title makes a really long acronym that no one knows what you're talking about.
It's harder to pronounce the acronym than it is just to say the movie title.
Yeah.
At least it's not the Zac Efron movie about the incredible... I can't remember it at all now.
Incredibly whatever, yeah.
Wickedly shocking and vile and evil or something, but yeah. So, but before getting discussing that real quick, so two quick tidbits. So one of the videos we had released, early on the site, like after it was in operation for a year, it was a video that got pretty popular and got shared by a bunch of mainstream outlets. It got shared by Bloody Disgusting and a few other sites.
Maybe
AV Club and IndieWire. I think a few places shared it. And it was a video that Sean had done where he swapped out some different segments from Psycho and It Follows and swapped the soundtracks for him. So had some Psycho clips with the It Follows soundtrack tracks, and then had some It Follows scenes with some of the soundtrack from Psycho. So a cool little experiment. And we initially had to put it on Vimeo because our YouTube channel just got deleted the week before, so we had to appeal and get that overturned and get it resituated and put back up. So we just had it on Vimeo and tried to avoid any copyright stuff because I think it got blocked when we tried to upload it. And it got really big, but then we decided we didn't use Vimeo ever and then let that pro subscription lapse, and it became unavailable. So I was able to re-upload it to YouTube recently, and it did not get flagged or taken down by copyright issues. So that is back available on YouTube now, so you can see that video.
And we did some more of those. You did a few of them, and I did a few more as well, too.
Yeah,
but that was the first one that kind of the reason we started those. So the reason we even thought about re-uploading this is somebody messaged us on Patreon. Theodore Rosenblum, thank you very much. He's a new patron. He was going to use it for, I think, to demonstrate something in one of his classes he teaches on film. But when I was messaging him about this, I kind of wasn't thinking much about It Follows when I was rewatching Under the Silver Lake, David Robert Mitchell's newest film. But that film is it feels very much like a Hitchcock film, and the score is very much, oh my gosh, now I'm blanking on his name. Who does the score for, he did, worked for De Palma after the fact.
Oh, I don't know.
The score for Psycho. Oh my gosh.
John Williams?
Yeah, but
That would be interesting. Hang on, let me look him up.
let's see. So for Psycho,
Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah.
So Disaster Piece, who did the music for It Follows, also did the music for Under the Silver Lake. It is very much a Hitchcock-style film in some regards, but the music also is very much like Bernard Herrmann. So I thought it was interesting going back to this soundtrack swap of It Follows and Psycho, because Disaster Piece also did the score for that. And I don't know what struck me about the original score for It Follows and swapping it with those two, but essentially I thought those worked pretty well together. Well, now they did make a more Hitchcock-style film with a Hitchcock-style score from Psycho. So it was like, this was years before when we did it, but it's weird how this stuff lined back up. But Under the Silver Lake, by the way, I like that film. I wasn't sure how I felt about it, but I think I really liked it. But it's a very interesting film at the very least.
I'm trying to think. The other soundtrack swaps we did the original 1978 or the original Halloween and The Guest, the Adam Wingard movie with Micah Monroe and Dan Stevens in it. And then you had done one that was Trick or Treat and Halloween 3. And then you'd also done one that was House of the Devil and Rosemary's Baby, I believe.
Yeah.
And then I had done one that really wasn't swapping it from two movies. It was just taking different scenes from the John Carpenter version of The Thing and then taking tracks from his Lost Themes more recent album and replacing some of the Morricone score with some of his newer original synth-style music. So there's some cool experiments of how it changes some of those scenes when you swap out the soundtracks.
Do we have a playlist of those on YouTube?
On our YouTube channel, they're all under features.
Okay. I didn't know if you had a specific playlist.
So
you'll have to dig around for them for a little while.
If you go to House of Vegas Store, there's different playlists on our channel, and one of them is just features, which is like the fourth one down, I think. and it has all those in that list.
Or you might be able to go to our site and search, but the It Follows one probably won't be working on our site right now unless we update that.
I updated it,
Okay,
so it's on
cool.
there too.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You can go to our site and search for that tag
But
or those.
yeah, so Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So we will. So there's two levels to this. So there are the real life events that inspired the film. So the late '60s Hollywood era, the movies and stars of the time, and of course the Manson family murder of Sharon Tate and her guest. So all of that we just said. I mean, like those are all real events that we will reference throughout. We will hold these specific spoilers for this movie in terms of what it does with the original characters or how it handles things. We'll hold that till the end, because I do think that you going into this movie do need to have a base level understanding of the real world atmosphere at the time, and who a lot of these different people they're referencing are. Because if you go in with just no knowledge of that whatsoever,
it wouldn't make a lot of sense.
Well, because a lot of times in movies you have a ticking clock, you have this urgency in the movie, and you have so Inglourious Bastards are trying to kill Hitler, and they're trying. So you have like a goal that's in mind that's pretty easy to understand. You events set up so that you know when they're going to attempt it, and if it's all just about tension to see if it succeeds or not. And Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, if you don't know the general dates or what happened, there's no ticking clock, and you're just kind of like, oh, it's all these little sprawling vignettes of different people and how they're interacting.
Yeah, this would be a weird movie for somebody who's just, because I think if people were interested in true crime, they would know, because that's a big thing.
Or if they're like 30, you know what I mean. That I feel like most would probably know because
I'm trying to think. I'm 29. And I knew pretty much, I'm going to say, but I think once you start getting a few years behind me, unless you're just really invested in true crime, there's a gap because, like, there's other things that kind of trump that. Because, like, somebody that's a little younger than us, like, John Bonet is probably way bigger than the Manson
Charles
stories
Manson was in prison for decades.
Yeah. And he passed away when the fuck, who cares?
Unceremoniously.
But even still, like even when I was younger, he would pop up in the news sometimes.
Yeah,
he'd pop up in the news. Like my
parole.
mom was a young mother. Like I think she had me when she was like 19 or 20. So I believe she was like born in I think the mid 60s. So she probably really doesn't remember it much, but she probably remembers some of it. Like
probably the trial.
So yeah, so like she's was right on the edge too. So I feel like I just know because of that.
And two, I think like too being involved in the horror community and stuff. Just how many people base characters off of that.
Oh,
and two, there was like the more recent movies that reference some of that stuff almost as like a direct slasher film and stuff. So there's like the icky. There's the icky real world.
And I've heard I heard some people tweet like there was teenagers that walked out and was like, what was up with those weird hippies?
Yeah.
And somebody said, well, how are they supposed to know? Zac Efron didn't play him in a Netflix series yet, which is true.
So this is a weird. This is the opposite of Marvel movies because they do not spoon feed you anything in this. Whereas like Marvel, a lot of times, I'm just using this as a comparison for younger audiences because if you come to this movie, like Tarantino doesn't be like, this is who this is. This is what happened. You kind of have to.
I honestly, this is a weird thing, and I don't want to sound pretentious, but I was thinking about that. About like normally, I think a film should accomplish everything within the boundaries of the end and the beginning.
Yeah,
typically, but for this, I give it a pass because that's why he made this film. Basically, you know what I mean? Like he played with those elements, but it's almost like, hey, this is for. I think a lot of people who were upset by their murders and kind of America, or I guess the world essentially kind of dealing with all this. So it was almost like a response to that. And I think for me, it gives it a pass on that. And it almost feels like this is and because it has to be just common knowledge that many younger people probably don't know about, because why should they? It almost feels like this is the first time he's made a quote unquote adult film. And not that the subject matter is over the heads of anybody or it's super mature in anything, but it's just like, hey, you kind of got to be older to kind of just think that people know what these things are when they walk into the movie theater. Well, it is for an older audience in that regard.
Compared to like Hateful Eight, because that's his most recent, like that one, nothing in it really felt personal, I guess. Like there's something you watch in it and you're like, I can really now, like I said, I'm 29, so I can't directly connect with some of the messages. We'll get into that more in spoilers, but I could. Whereas like that one doesn't really have anything. Or like Inglourious Bastards, outside of how you might feel about what they're doing to the people they're doing it to, you're not really like, oh yeah, I really, know.
So I think like a good movie to compare this to from recently is Extremely Wicked, Shockingly Evil and Vile. So
I would say that's a good movie.
Zac Efron. Well, I'm just saying.
I know what you meant. Yeah, I know what you meant.
So that movie was based on real life events about Ted Bundy, but the movie almost played it in a way where you didn't have the foreknowledge of what all the reality of that was. So what I'm saying is, in that movie, it probably played pretty well to somebody that had no comprehension or knowledge of the Ted Bundy case, because that way the movie plays that more ambiguously, like, oh, is he guilty or not?
But
so
and
I
they
think,
also get somebody like Zac Efron, who is an attractive individual, to play him. Whereas I think from now on, Hollywood should no longer cast attractive individuals, or that they do, they should just
in any
ugly
film
them
ever.
No, they should just, when they cast these like pieces of garbage, don't make them attractive. Like,
Well, I
just
think
make them the
that was supposedly the point of that Ted Bundy was supposed to swoon people and everything.
The
The
point I was trying to make was, so you have that movie where it kind of plays better, really, if you don't know anything about Ted Bundy, I think, as opposed to this movie, 100% plays better when you know about the Manson family murders and Sharon Tate and everything. So I think it's like this weird juxtaposition where this movie says, you knew what happened. Let's play fast and loose with some of these facts in a different way than kind of taking a real true life event and kind of trying to make it cinematic. I think there's a difference there.
Recreating it beat for beat.
And that's just, it's not even anything about the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but there are scenes where Leonardo DiCaprio's character Rick Dalton is involved with movies and shows and stuff that in real life he wasn't, because that wasn't a real person. Because I think his character is kind of based on Burt Reynolds.
Mm-hmm.
And that,
did
TV, went overseas, and then got to be a star later in his career in his own right.
Clint Eastwood, too.
Clint Eastwood.
The Burt Reynolds was...
Well, Burt Reynolds...
we'll go into that more.
His stuntman was like... Burt Reynolds and his stuntman was, I think, kind of the inspiration... Or, at least something that inspired the relationship between Rick Dalton and Cliff, his stuntman. So, and this movie's sprawling. It has a ton of people in it that I was watching. I was like, wait a minute. Who is that? Because it... Like, a lot of characters that are not in the movie for all that long are people you've seen or heard of.
Yeah.
It's like Rebecca Gayhart's in it for like 10 seconds.
Like, again, like,
a bunch of people are in like little blink and you'll miss it.
But they do point him out sometimes. But again, like this movie, if you're just not really familiar with like 60s cinema or movies, like you're going to miss a lot of the stuff, because there's, people they drop in there and it's like, if you've never seen a Steve McQueen movie, like, you're not going to get it as much. And again, like, I think, again, that's kind of like, we're on the fringe of that age gap where like a lot of people, just your general mass audience is not people who really enjoy movies, but how many people my age or younger have really watched many Steve McQueen films?
Probably, and like another element of, because this movie had a lot of controversy surrounding it because of off-screen stuff that had nothing to do with the movie and the movie itself, and then like Roman Polanski. So this movie is very much set in the viewpoint of what Polanski was considered in 1969, not what he's considered in the present day.
Because even in this, they reference like he had done Rosemary's Baby and he was huge.
It's hard to explain exactly what the plot of this movie is, but it's basically Rick Dalton is a former TV star that's kind of doing guest spots on different episodic television, and he feels like his career is fading. And Cliff is played by Brad Pitt, is his stuntman / kind of driver and handyman that just does all this work for him, and so he feels his career's on the decline. And it's, his exploits in Hollywood with Clint interacting with some, different California people in the LA neighborhoods. And then Sharon Tate and her group and like crossing paths. Because, it's not really like Pulp Fiction, that it's not told out of order chronologically and kind of leaving you like with an end point for a story and then seeing how it happened and got to that point. This one's much more chronologically told, even has some narration in it, which is Kurt Russell. It has like titles for stuff. Like, it's very weird stylistically because he jumps all around, and it pretty much works. Like, it never really brought me out of it, because you'll be watching it. And then too, since the movie is from the perspective of Rick Dalton being an actor on a television show, there's these like weird things they'll do where the entire scene as he's shooting it plays out from the camera placement and movement that the show would have. but it's like filming him for this movie. So you get to see as like the scene breaks, and he's like, line, and they stop and discuss
But they never
it.
show the camera people.
So it's like this weird thing when you don't really think about it. It's like it's kind of interesting because I can't really remember too many things that were shot that way. And then they would show you scenes from movies he was in and stuff, and
or little TV shows because he kind of
and there were like some other very minor things that I think would confuse younger audiences. That even for a second was kind of like had me going, huh? Is there's a scene like it's in all the trailers like where Sharon Tate watches one of the movies that she's in, and they didn't digitally alter it or replace Sharon Tate, so it's actual Sharon Tate in the movie with Margot Robbie playing Sharon Tate watching it. And it took me a second to realize like, oh, they didn't do anything effects wise. It's just they played the movie and had the act. It's like, so it might be kind of a weird disconnect for people that aren't aware of what they're doing.
I like that they did that.
Me too.
No, because it plays reverent. It's reverent to the actress and things. I'm just saying for an audience that's not super engaged in what this plot was going in or this era or this thing, it could be confusing.
Well, I'll just say this: like having
They didn't know that was a real movie.
like
You know what I mean? That she was going to see.
Yeah.
because everything's so fake in this, but so there's real stuff, there's fake stuff, but coming out like having been mainly to watch like big blockbuster type movies this year, like this and The Dead Don't Die are kind of like a
Counter programming.
yeah, but it's nice because neither of those movies. I'm just using those because those are two. This is going to make $100 million eventually, or make a little bit more, but. And it's Tarantino, but still, it's like it's kind of nice to go from something that is as structured as like Marvel with Spider-Man: Far From Home or Endgame, where it's like this, and it follows. When you come to this, and they just kind of like some of the coolest scenes in this movie is just Brad Pitt driving around that old Cadillac. It's just all.
Here's what I think this
music.
is. This is the first time Quentin Tarantino's made a hangout film.
Yeah, and that's what this is.
I don't know if he coined the term, but he was the first one I hear talked about that term as far as Richard Linklater's film, like Slackers or Dazed and Confused, and then most recently Everybody Wants Some. He has he loves those elements. Of course, Pulp Fiction, like they're building characters, but really it's them hanging out talking about cheeseburgers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they are building the characters, but he kind of just this is the first time he's really dove into that, and he has not been worried about an overarching plot or having these tight scenes where there's an explosion of violence or something in between of them to kind of wake you up.
I think that's kind of what makes this movie so refreshing because like I've watched so many movies where it's like it just like I'm not beating up on Marvel, but they have a strict. This is what we're doing. This is our. mission.
That's every blockbuster film.
But
you know what I mean?
And all this has a mission. Like we're just gonna have 5 minutes of Brad Pitt driving around.
And listen to some good music.
Like, that's cool. Because you don't always get that, and it just too like. And this is where nostalgia from a time period that wasn't even alive in gets to me. But we're, me and you were car guys, and I'm sure you like cars too. And it's just kind of awesome seeing. I
think they used Michael Madsen's car also that was used in Reservoir Dogs.
And they have, here you get the shot of L.A., which looks probably like it did at the time period, and you have all these beautiful cars. It's just really cool. You don't get that a lot.
The movie is definitely
not in that way.
It was definitely a love letter to that era of cinema in Hollywood, and I would say this is a more sentimental and kind film than Tarantino has made in recent years. Because The Hateful Eight definitely had a mean streak. Django Unchained had a pretty mean streak. Inglourious Basterds did. So this is the first movie where he's kind of like, I know you said like the first adult film because like I think Pulp Fiction and Reservoir Dogs those are very much like R-rated adult entertainment, not like in the porn sense, just like movies aimed at adults. But this is the first film that didn't really have kind of all the pulp elements or the genre elements so heavily built into it. Like Kill Bill,
he has some flashes of those in here, but they're not the selling point.
Yeah, and there's not much violence or action.
And I think that kind of plays out in who the audience is. Because when I saw this in the theater screening I saw, it was mostly like older adults. I mean, granted, I had to see it during like a midday screening on a weekday, just because of the way timing worked out and stuff like that. But it wasn't a bunch of teenagers when I went. Like the couple next to me. A little bit older, and then it was funny because they had like a little group of people that were there sitting together, and then at one point like, oh, is that Timothy Olyphant from Justified? And like calling out like, oh, is that so and so? So I think that this movie, so people who do have an affinity or a fondness for a lot of that 60s and 70s like television and movies and spaghetti westerns and all that stuff, so people who did enjoy watching that and who enjoyed that as their entertainment. They came out to see this movie because, like, oh, it's got Brad Pitt and Leo DiCaprio and Margot Robbie, and this is referring back to a lot of things that I liked when I was younger. I think it's getting that audience in the theaters who didn't go for other Tarantino films.
Yeah, because a lot of times with his movies, it's just like, like Inglourious Basterds, because I just watched that before I watched this. You just have scenes of, I guess I'm desensitized to a lot of like what, because of the stuff we watch, but it's a violent movie, but we've seen worse.
The times that there is violence in the movie, people in the theater mostly reacted with laughter.
What,
I'll hold, or no, this movie.
Because
specific movie.
It's very.
Yeah, I'm holding it to the end.
Yeah,
but it was just interesting the way it was handled. So this is a movie that does have like a very small number of scenes that could make people slightly squeamish, but it's not the point of the film, and it's very limited and brief. And it probably plays worse than it actually is if you sit there and just freeze frame and watch it, because that's how most movies work.
Yeah, there was plenty of people in the audience who were 60s and maybe close to 70s. Like, even the lady next to us, she was talking to my wife, like, if you need a blanket, you get cold. Here's one, Like, the whole row in front of us was a big group of people that bought it out that were older, and a bunch of the women in it. Brad Pitt takes his shirt off at one point, and they're like,
well, it's funny because when I was there, I went last Friday at like 11 because I'd been in training all week. So I had one day of work. I'm like, I'm not going to work on Friday. Take off.
Yeah.
So I went at 11 and saw it, and it was mostly older people. But then the couple seats down was a group of younger guys, and they were all very happy. And Brad Pitt took his shirt off. It was just funny, like seeing they're happy for it. It's like you wouldn't.
Oh
think,
yeah, I was laughing.
Yeah, but it's just funny because it's like they were. I think me and them were probably the only people under 30. I think everybody else was probably
very into. So a lot of people are
they were younger. They were probably
like I was thinking back through Tarantino's career. Because he's made exploitation style films, but he hasn't delved into the female nudity, male gaze aspect as much in his movies as
he has male gaze, male foot gaze.
Well, I was gonna say.
I'm not trying to. I mean, like, it's an easy joke, but I mean that's a sexual thing apparently to him, just from Pulp Fiction, the conversation.
Even Kill Bill.
Well, my point was, Kill Bill, Death Proof. From everything, Jackie Brown. But my point was like he doesn't have a ton. Like a lot of people make exploitation anything. It's just filled with unnecessary nudity.
Yeah, is there any nudity in his movies?
That's why I was thinking back. I was like, actually, I can't really remember any. Or if it was not sexualized.
Because we'd watch Pulp Fiction and...
Because, Reservoir Dogs is all male characters.
Yeah.
Except from, I think a brief interaction, like a female in the background.
I've never watched Jackie Brown, so I don't know about that.
What?
But
No.
all the other ones...
Oh, man. Jackie Brown is almost closer to this.
So it's one of those things where...
Isn't his first movie?
No, third or fourth.
It's one I've never seen.
And that's where a lot of people, when they talk about exploitation... I think exploitation really took off after Kill Bill and then Grindhouse and all that stuff. The difference was Grindhouse didn't do well at the theater, box office wise, but Kill Bill was taking all those exploitation tropes and then honing it into a movie that's watchable today and trimming out a lot of the excess stuff that really wouldn't work too well today. And I feel like this movie is completely devoid of that altogether. It's more of just a traditional unsprawling film. There are genre elements.
Well, there's definitely genre elements, but
he still definitely has affinity for westerns.
But when you watch this, and this movie to me felt kind of like a western the way it kind of did a little bit of stuff, but I didn't feel like this was an exploitation film. Maybe it is. I personally, when I came out, because to me
there was exploitation too. Anytime you deal with anything that has to do with true crime, I almost feel like that is exploitation in some way.
I agree.
But in this, that wasn't the point of it. It was just, let's make some fictional characters and see what happens in this, world where they exist.
Well, actually, and here's the thing too, it's funny because I like a lot of stuff that happened, but this is one of those movies where Leonardo DiCaprio was great in this. Mm-hmm. He was great, and just when he's sitting there with Al Pacino, and they're having their little discussion, that's great.
Well, and two,
when he pretty much telling him he's the pudding guy.
You reminded me of something. So this isn't really explored too much, but at the beginning of that, he is stuttering a lot in those scenes. Yes. And I was like, is he going to have a stuttering problem? And he never really does anymore.
I think what happened in the movie is that he was an alcoholic who was going through anxiety.
Yeah.
And when he was in the moments where he wasn't focusing, or if he was self-conscious or worried about it, it would rear its head and cause that.
When he lost his self-esteem or confidence in himself, it comes out.
But then when he sat there and focused in and worked on it, he wasn't thinking about it. It wasn't happening.
Well, real quick, usually we just give our general feelings of the movie, you know, what when you got done with the movie, how did you feel about it?
So there's one thing I wish they had done differently, and we'll get to that later. But overall, I came out of it thinking, because you know, like all the new stuff around Tarantino in the past year, like with having worked with Harvey Weinstein for so long, and then his treatment of Uma Thurman during Kill Bill, and then some of the stuff he had said on like radio interviews in the past, and all that stuff, and how he had treated some of the actresses he had worked with, and things like that. Like all that, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. But then watching this movie, I didn't really get that feel from it. Because it didn't feel like it was about the things that people complained about his other movies doing. Now, there was still controversy about it. But going into it, none of those really things came to mind. Because I just watched it and I was like, oh, this is enjoyable. It's kind of just hopping around, all these enjoyable interactions between these different characters. So, I came away from it enjoying it. Like, I definitely liked it more than The Hateful Eight.
I hate
I think I liked it better than Django. I think I probably
Django's my least favorite.
I think I probably liked it better than Death Proof. And then out of to me, Tarantino's top tier in no specific ranking or order is Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown, Inglourious Bastards, and then Reservoir Dogs and Kill Bill are kind of up there too. Just depends on my mood. And then I feel like the lower tier is kind of Death Proof and Django and Hateful Eight. I think this is more towards the upper tier than the lower tier.
Yeah, with me, just to be honest, this is my favorite movie of the year. I think too, it's just so different because it is nice to go and just watch something that's not the same thing you've seen all the time. Because it's when you go out to movies, and now that I've had the Movie Pass thing through AMC, I see more movies, but still, you generally go out for certain things. Okay, if I'm going to go spend money and time doing this, it's going to be a big release. And it's weird to say this isn't a big release, because it's Tarantino, but it's not on the same scale as Avengers, because it didn't crash the sites when it...
The movie debuted to a opening weekend of $40 million, which was above expectations and his biggest opening so far. And then if it performs similarly to Inglourious Bastards or other films, it'll do pretty well.
Inglourious Bastards wasn't far off though, right? And then this opened in 500 more theaters, and there's ticket prices going up. You know what I mean? But it's a big opening, but it's around that ballpark.
I think with Inglourious Bastards, because that's probably my favorite Tarantino movie. The two movies I see in theaters the most, and this probably says a lot about me, is Step Brothers and Inglourious Bastards. Because I remember seeing those on repeat, because they came out, I feel probably around within a year of each other. It had to be 08.
Inglourious Bastards was 09, I believe.
Because I just remember when those movies came out, I just saw them, I guess too, because I was in college.
Well, too, it's funny listening to, there's a podcast that had just been released somewhat recently. That was a Q&A with Tarantino after Inglourious Bastards came out.
Yeah, I listened to that.
With Jeff Goldsmith, who does the Q&A podcast. And then the release of it got held up because initially the studio, when they recorded it, was well, hold it until it's released, and it's been out for a while. And they're okay, well, hold it until the award season is over. And he just never got the okay to release it. And then he met Tarantino again, and Tarantino's oh, no, release it immediately. Do whatever you want. So I listened to it, and it was funny listening to them when he's at the height of his powers. There was no controversy really around anything back when stuff was, getting nominated. He was a really hot name and one of the people that everybody was all about. And there was just no cloud over anything, or there weren't think piece articles being written. Because now I think it is kind of overboard. People object to every element of everything.
It's too much.
So it's just there's a constant state of. But back then when he released Inglourious Bastards, it was very different hearing the way he talked then than I'm assuming how he would talk now. But it sounded like that movie went through a lot of script changes and a lot of conceptual changes and took a long time.
Oh, yeah.
As opposed to this movie, I'm not really sure what other iterations or versions existed before the one they came to. But
when we get to spoilers, before I went and watched this movie, given the content of what it covers, I was I'm going to go Wikipedia, I'm going to read what happens, because being that it could be exploited.
I'm surprised you went to see it, actually,
because if you were listen to the podcast, I've talked bad about it. I was because when it gets to this kind of stuff, especially we talked about with the Zodiac and stuff that's based on real world events, I get kind of weird about it
because I don't want it to celebrate.
But I never thought he would do that. What led you think that he was going to actually lean into going full not to diss him, but a Rob Zombie, a Devil's Rejects.
That.
I didn't think he would ever do that. So you kind of thought he was going to go that direction to where that's what this film was.
Because to me, Rob Zombie is with the family he's made up or whatever. The
Firefly Clan.
Yeah, like that to me feels very Manson-esque, especially with who's the Bill guy?
Bill Moseley.
Bill Moseley.
the era,
very. And it's like, I don't want a movie that
identifies with those characters.
Yes, or glorified these characters. I don't want to see a movie where you have like a suave Charles Manson and, like... Because there's other movies where he's like been in it, like Dickie. What's the movie? Dickie Betts Walk Hard or whatever it is.
Oh, Dewey Cox.
Dewey Cox. Dickie Betts is for Allman Brothers. But like in that, he meets Manson's like, that Manson's a nice guy, But it's like,
well, and too, when you look at so I think that this movie, what it did, so there's like a lot of the true crime obsession that's been more recent,
and there's been around forever. And there's exploded with podcasts.
Yeah, podcasts. There's even podcasts that are just straight up about like, oh, these are my favorite serial killers. It's like, I think that's a bad approach to it. But so stuff like Mindhunter, which is a fictional show about it's a fictional show that's about the real world creation of the FBI's crime profiling program. Like, it gets kind of murky. Like, how do you represent it? Because like in the first season, one of the killers became like a really popular meme, and people were really in love with the performance. And it's just like, oh, where's the line drawn? So if that's your concern, this movie really doesn't step its toe into that whatsoever. Yes. The Manson clan is only like, they're not even referred to as the Manson family. They don't even mention Manson once. They refer to him as Charlie. Yeah. So it's not really like a glorification of, oh, we're misfits and we're not a part of the mainstream society. It almost seems like Tarantino's approach in this is, the counterculture was garbage. Let's go with these, old school Hollywood types.
Which you could see, yeah. I mean, this film outright hates hippies. And,
yes.
a 2.5 minute news package would glorify Manson and get more, maybe get some more fans for him. 2 minutes and a half on the news than this whole film. Well, you know what I mean?
But again, like, you just get worried with that because it's like, especially because, like, obviously if you watch the movie, you know what happens to Sharon Tate in real life. So it's like, I don't want. First of all, I didn't want to see that. So that's where you get a little bit, and you don't know because you don't know what people are going to do, and it's like I just want to read it, and we'll get into the spoilers because what I read. So I don't know if it was somebody just wrote it, or
it's probably somebody just made it up,
or if I don't know if it was through the studio. I don't know, but it was vastly different from what actually
before
happened.
a movie's released. You can get stuff out there that's not fact checked.
Yeah. It's interesting. It kind of I know
because if a studio goes in there and corrects it, they're verifying stuff that isn't.
Yeah.
Or is, but like the movie didn't really glorify that. I'm trying to think of like other things about it. Like it was very much giving you a sense of what that, LA, like that slice of it was back then. And it really is a story about, if you're in the middle or late stages of your career and you haven't hit the level of success that you want, like, that's okay.
But the thing is funny that I like in this movie, I don't know if they did this on purpose or not, but Leonardo DiCaprio, I think in real life is like 44, right?
Yes, I wonder if he probably identified with the character some of like...
The character in one of the shows he's in is Timothy Olyphant, who is like in his 50s.
Yeah.
So it's funny because
Timothy Olyphant doesn't look like he's in
No. But it's just funny though that like I don't know if that was done on purpose because it's Tarantino, so I don't think he overlooked that when he casted these people. But it's just funny that like he's getting replaced by a person who in real life is older than him.
But I think also,
but it could have just been like he's just on the upshoot of his career.
I think an element of it is when a lot of these actors, once they hit a certain age, it's relatively difficult to tell the difference between 35 and 50 with a lot of people.
Yeah.
So you can interchangeably be like, oh, even though this person isn't younger, they're the fresh face.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if Tarantino, because like when he came out with Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, and those scripts he wrote early on, he was kind of part of the counterculture, like the indie film movement. So I wonder if his thoughts and feelings about this story would have been different if this was the second movie he made instead of the ninth.
The only thing you can look at this is
would he identify more with the counterculture in the beginning of his career as opposed to now he's part of the old guard?
Well, I think something too that gets kind of overlooked in this, and this is more the true crime or just cultural impact that the Manson murders had, is that was like an end of an era. That was kind of like the end of just like the general
Gold Hollywood.
Well, not just that, just people leaving the doors unlocked, and like there's other things that happened, but that was such a big thing that it kind of ended the hippie movement because that's when it changed.
I'd also heard the argument that Nixon getting elected the second time was like the nail in the coffin of the hippie movement because it was like, okay, we're stamping this out.
It's also...
I know.
This was like one of the things
the common belief is that, hey, this whole thing just ended that
ruined the PR for the hippies.
Yeah.
Well, and like just okay, this crazy, it's this streak of serial killers around this time too made everybody more leery. Just like now, unfortunately we're dealing with a lot of mass shootings, so it's like, now we have that fear of just going out anywhere, not just locking our doors, going out to some places.
Well, and without even getting into it, I think people in today's world still would use the Manson family to demonize all hippie culture. People in today's world, and with Antifa, people use that as like a blanket thing to try to discredit anybody that disagrees with them or things like that. So I think that has always been the case. People do, but it is funny because this movie almost shows like a detest for the hippies.
Well,
it's
it probably existed.
and then
Well,
I'm just saying from Tarantino's perspective, because it's portrayed as
from those two characters and,
Cliff
how
Booth
they're portrayed.
Cliff Booth is a real man.
well, Cliff didn't really hate the hippies. He was
more amused.
He just
he was amused and had no time to fool around.
Yeah,
and wasn't intimidated or didn't. But so you
mean to jump into my thoughts? So we get into spoilers.
Yeah.
One other thing too about that podcast you were talking about. Again, he mentions how the first film he worked on or tried to make was my best friend's birthday or something.
Yeah.
And when he saw Clerks, he said he always jokes with Tarantino about this, because he loves Clerks.
Or Kevin Smith.
But he says, yeah. What did I say?
Tarantino.
Yeah,
He always
Tarantino jokes
with Kevin Smith, and he says, "Oh, I didn't, he didn't realize you can make a film like this." He said, "I've got a movie like this in my garage," or whatever. And he's like, Clerks is a much better film than this, but essentially a film that really doesn't go anywhere. That film doesn't. It's people talking a lot, and they're dealing with their own, I guess, place in life, and that's what this film is. It's almost like this is his Clerks also, where it's a lot of them just figuring out their place in the world at this part of their life, and that's what Clerks 2 is also, but later on in life. But then we have these moments of story beats that kind of cap off a couple segments of it.
It's just funny how they can take this movie and make mundane things interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think too, like I said before, if you have no interest in Hollywood or filmmaking and you have no recollection of things from that era or who any of the people are talking about, and you don't know who Steve McQueen is or Bruce Lee, a lot of this is just going to be completely this is kind of over.
I don't know. I think it depends on the audience. I think it depends, because still, these characters are great. When it comes down to it, these two characters are phenomenal. Just like all of his films, he fills it with so many great supporting characters. We don't really ever see two male characters like this with this sort of relationship on screen, really ever, in a major mainstream film that I can think of. Somebody pointed out oh, this is a very Shane Black movie, and that it's kind of like a buddy comedy type thing. But in Shane Black's films, they're strong antagonists, and that's what makes a lot of the comedy with this movie. They've just got each other's backs the entire time. You know what I mean? That's what's so great about it.
It could be a good double bill with The Nice Guys.
Yes, yeah. And somebody brought that up too. Did you ever watch The Nice Guys?
No, I want to.
I mean, it's set in the same exact era, and Shane Black is almost the same age as Tarantino. He has the same, he wanted to do the same thing of his memory of LA in that era. But I heard somebody say hey, Shane, The Nice Guys has half the budget, so he couldn't spend as much time on the on basically just the sets and everything.
Yeah,
it still looks that film still looks great.
Well,
but this looks like
that's where this
you
movie
couldn't do
shines,
anymore,
because just you put Brad Pitt in the Cadillac, or even when Margot Robbie's driving around and she's in the Porsche and she's just driving around Hollywood. We're getting that a little bit with spoilers, but
sometimes it's how do they make it look this good?
And it looks so good, and with her, because I don't feel like we talked about her performance at all. Her speaking roles. It's very limited in this film.
Well, they give you a sense of her as a person.
They give you a better sense of her as the person, I feel. And, maybe other people disagree, and that's fine. But I don't think what she did in the movie, that I needed more, because you got the gist of who she was. But I do think there's a point where you don't want to beat people over the head with it.
Well, too, if they had shown a lot more, it would have felt more exploitive.
Yes.
Because this is kind of give you a sense of, who she was in that time. She was a starlet on the rise. And all these things, and it gives you just a sense of it, but it's, I don't know what the.
I mean, again, I think acting is not just the words that come out of actors' mouth. We get to spend time with her, time of her, kind of, going to the movies, which we see in the trailer, and just her being alone with herself, and you kind of understand just through all that, her place in the world during this time, her career at this time, you get to know a lot about her using very little again, very little dialogue, which is a way better way of handling it. You know, it's so much more elegant than over explaining. We have a couple people set up, like Steve McQueen, you know, maybe gives a little bit of backstory for people who don't know at least this point in time. And then other than that, we just kind of get to follow her along some, which I think is so great.
And, you know, I was thinking about too, I can't remember. I don't think Cliff Booth had that much to say in this movie either. I mean, he does talk, but it's not like his character is still more, I feel like definitely influenced by the Clint Eastwood anti-heroes. Where he probably speaks more, but it's not like he's overflowing with dialogue.
Yeah, so like
not compared to
he speaks.
Rick Dalton.
He speaks when he has to. Rick Dalton is always talking to himself, and he's insecure. You know, Cliff is just he knows who he is. He seems, whether or not he's happy with his place in the world, he seems to accept it either way, and you know what I mean. And he's just got his friends back, and it's just a great friendship on camera, and that's what this film hinges around, and that's why I think it works, even if you don't understand all that stuff. But to have an understanding just makes it you appreciate it so much more.
And two, so just to go over the very basic elements, like the movie is shot very well. It's definitely, you know, it's shot on film. I think there's even some 8mm stuff in it.
Scored very well.
You know, looks great. The acting in it's phenomenal, because there are scenes where you have Leonardo DiCaprio playing an actor that's acting in a scene. Great, because you get to see it kind of, you know, turn on, like, because sometimes when actors do that, they're like, okay, well, act poorly. But I feel like there's a bunch of these scenes where, like, okay, go for it and give the same performance, and in the scene, give the same performance you're giving for your Oscar bait movies and stuff. So I feel like there's a lot of really good elements, like, and then the acting across the board is filled out with all kinds of cameos and guest stars and small roles and all this stuff. So from all those elements is, you know, technically, great. So, you know, all that's great. So I guess, you know, we can move into discussing spoilers now. So this is full spoilers for the movie.
Also too, I want to say, it's like Midsummer is my favorite film of the year. It's like, this is probably I think this probably inches it out. I need to see it again. I don't know what ranks for me, but it's very high on the Tarantino list. Only seen it once, whereas all of his other films I've seen
many times,
5 to 25 times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's gonna.
Well, and two, because like The Hateful Eight is on Netflix now as a series.
Yeah. Actually, no. Hateful Eight I've only seen the once.
So I do wonder.
And Django I've probably seen one and a half.
I just can't revisit Hateful Eight. I've tried.
It's a long film.
It's just a long.
Yeah. So, but like, I think he had said like none of his other movies were really lending themselves to that structure, because it was very evenly divided up into chapters and things like that. But yeah, so getting into full spoilers for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If you haven't seen the movie, we're going to reveal the big plot points and things in it. So earlier when I was talking about the one element I didn't like, is I didn't like how they handled Bruce Lee in the movie.
See, okay, I will say, because I love martial art films and stuff, and this is kind of where I'm okay with it, because as much as I love martial art, like Jackie Chan's my martial artist, like, and I say that because that's who was.
He was
big
still making movies when
I was a kid. That's
he's still making movies.
Yeah, but like in the '90s, it was Jackie Chan.
Rush Hour, and then we got to see the American imports of Rumble in the Bronx.
Yeah, like Rumble in the Bronx is a movie that I just remember. Like Jackie Chan is, maybe if it was Jackie Chan, I might be a little bit more bothered, because that was like my guy. Does that make sense?
Well, but I think so. The idea is there's a scene where the Cliff Booth character played by Brad Pitt was a stuntman that was on the set of, I guess, the Green Hornet, and Jackie Chan was in set, or not Jackie Chan, good talking about him, Bruce Lee was on
First of
set.
all, let me just say, I love this scene. I laughed.
I loved it. I thought it was good.
So continue.
I'm just saying, so the idea...
if I'm laughing during it, it's because I'm rethinking
the
about
idea is that Bruce Lee is bragging, or, just talking about martial arts and how watching Cassius Clay and Joe Frazier box, like, you get to see people really going at it, as opposed to martial arts. You have to kind of stick to the formality of it. And all that
again,
stuff.
though, if somebody's young enough, they probably don't know who Cassius Clay is.
Which is Muhammad Ali before he changed his name.
Yeah, so that's like a nod to where, like, if somebody doesn't know, then they're like, who?
So, and then
Anyway.
he's just talking about it, and then the Cliff character, he thinks he's just really being bragging. So he says, somebody asks Bruce Lee, what happened if you fought Cassius Clay? He's like, I'd cripple him. And then he laughs. He's like, what's so funny? So then they decide to fight, where it's going to be, they're not going to punch the face. They're just doing a friendly competition to, whoever gets knocked down 2 times loses. So Bruce Lee does, like all of his stances and poses, and then, just to get a drop kick that knocks him down, he's like, oh, that's pretty good. So then when he goes to do it again, Cliff is able to block it and throw him against a car.
And does a lot of damage to a car.
And then Bruce Lee springs back up immediately, and they go for the third time, where it's kind of at a draw. But even though it was a draw, technically, it was embarrassing to Bruce Lee. I just feel like there could have been a way to do that wasn't at his expense as much.
So I was a huge Bruce Lee fan, and I grew up with Jackie Chan first, and then started digging into like Jet Li, a little bit after that. And then got into Bruce Lee like in high school, watched, doesn't have many films, but I got a collection of his film, watched all those, watched several things on him, huge fan of his. And then before this, I was seeing some stuff about it, and they're like, oh yeah, I guess he was a little bit full of himself sometimes. And I didn't know that. So for me, I appreciated that it was like, okay, is this an exaggerated but maybe slightly more accurate portrayal instead of being this mythic figure of, what I mean?
That's why I kind of liked
this, like,
it. Because,
superhero.
Yeah.
Again, Tarantino, it flips your expectations on its heads. And yeah, it's unfortunate if he's a little bit harsh on him, and Bruce Lee's daughter's not happy with this portrayal.
But he does, and like I said, I say this because, again, like I said, I might feel differently if this was portrayed as like a Schwarzenegger or a Jackie Chan or just like any of those huge action stars from the 90s that you grew watching up.
Yeah.
But like I don't have that connection with Bruce Lee like I have with some other people.
I don't know. It's weird. See, I would almost feel like if it was Schwarzenegger, I'd be like, okay, that's fine, because I still love him.
He's alive to talk about it.
I mean, even if he was gone, it's like, oh, I still love him. This is just a funny version of him through Tarantino's lens, because this just like, I mean, okay, this is all set in Tarantino's world, it seems to be. So, the way Hitler's killed, Kill Bill, the heightened reality of Kill Bill, like it's all feels like,
which is all heavily influenced by Bruce Lee.
So he loves him. He loves him. So for me, it was like I was fine with it because it all feels like his heightened reality world.
And I do feel like Bruce Lee gets, because of he died so young, you do get put up on a pedestal, and everything you see is just he might have been the baddest man ever, but you always get that. But then the other argument I have is Cliff Booth a reliable narrator in that scene?
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's
how he's remembering it.
Because because you think about it in real life, and this movie's pretty grounded. Yeah. So if you took that car, which I don't know exactly what it was, but it was a Cadillac or a Buick or some
car that was made of real
heavy American car, and you threw somebody into a car, and you did that damage, they ain't getting up. You're not getting up, but Bruce Lee gets up like instantly.
Yeah,
so it's like he's still a badass, because if you threw me into a car like that, I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important to note that this is him thinking back on why he wasn't invited to be a stuntman for whatever.
Yeah. That Kurt Russell's character was the coordinator for.
Yeah, so he's thinking back, so it is his recollection, and he's probably thinking about it differently from his perspective. Yeah. So he may have been a little bit antagonizing.
Well, you don't know, but the only thing is, like, that's really just reading the subtext after the fact. Nothing else they presented in the movie showed it as a skewed version of reality.
Well, the only other thing that would limit me that way is, because something we didn't talk about too, is that goes directly along with this, is that there's a rumor
may have killed his wife.
They killed his wife. And then it does a cutback to where he's on a boat and his wife is just nagging at him, and
which is like Natalie Wood.
Yeah, which it looks like he has. Yeah, I didn't even catch.
He was about to.
That's another thing. But he has
a. Yeah, but the actress that played his wife was Rebecca Gayheart, who was involved in her own series of incidents, like the car crash stuff.
But you have him, and he has, I think, a spear gun or something in his lap, and then he just kind of does a look, and then it cuts, and you never know.
He's drinking beer, and they're on choppy water.
Yeah.
So in my mind, with that whole scene, again, I immediately thought, oh, this is like Natalie Wood thing. This is the same era, but also too, you get this nervousness for me, because I was thinking this is just like this scene in Pulp Fiction when he leans back and he's talking to him with a gun and it goes off because they hit a bump because they're in choppy water. That's how I took it. Like, and I saw some articles about however you read that scene with what happens may color your opinion of the end of the film and all this.
Because the idea is, if you read that scene as it was a tragic accident, which everyone blamed him for, and he's getting this redemptive moment throughout the course of the movie, that's one reading. The other reading is he did do it, got away with it, and it's just glorification of complete unchecked male aggression.
Well, there is a dropped line that they never revisit, never talk about again, but Rick Dalton's like, well, he's a war hero. Mm-hmm. But they never really specify which war, but I would say it had to be World War II or the Korean War, given the time period. Because he wouldn't have been in Vietnam.
Yeah, because he said 8 years prior they were still working on stuff.
So,
so it had to be
young to be
because
World War II.
Because his dad
in his 40s.
His dad was in World War II.
Yeah.
He was leading the Inglourious Bastards.
Yeah. So he
And
was
DiCaprio's grandfather was in Django, unfortunately.
so he was at least in the Korean War, but anyway, it's kind of dropped off of that. So you could say, well, maybe he was just such a decorated soldier that they turned a blind eye to what he did, because that did.
Well, that
happen
also
a
gives
lot.
you some more context for how he's actually able to be good at fighting and stuff.
So back to the Bruce Lee scene, though. First of all, I love that entire sequence of, again, that's the first moment in the film where we know that Cliff is sticking up for Rick the entire time. This is kind of the first moment where you get to see Rick Dalton, if he's going to get Cliff's back just as much when he's arguing with Kurt Russell. And I was wondering if he was going to turn on him, turn on him, but just be like, okay, that's fine.
Because that's a general shtick in these movies.
Yes,
and you have the friends, you have it divide.
But he doesn't. He's just like pushing it. And he's like, I understand, but come on. You know what I mean? He's pushing.
Yeah.
And he convinces him. And again, we have Kurt Russell, who the connection to Death Proof and, Stuntman Mike and all that. You know, it's all kind of murky, but Kurt Russell is obviously phenomenal in that. And he's like, just stay away from my wife. You get that whole wonderful sequence, which is done in one take of the kick and everything. That whole delivery, which is a great Bruce Lee impression, I think. That's all done in one take, and then they go back and forth. And then, of course, you have Zoe Bell, also a stunt person from Death Proof, come in. And for me, she stole the scene when she came in.
Oh, it
there.
was great.
Like, it's hard to steal a scene against Kurt Russell, Brad Pitt, and a great Bruce Lee impersonator.
He did do a great Bruce Lee.
But Zoe Bell comes in, and it's like, she is hilarious. Like, that scene right there, that's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And I understand it's a little problematic for Bruce Lee. And I heard some people saying that there's some weird racism about it when the audience is laughing at his impression. But my audience did not laugh at his impression. I didn't either, because I'm like, maybe it's because of the older audience, and I'm like, this is Bruce Lee. This is how he talks. That's not funny.
So I think the problematic element in that scene comes in. So the audience I was in, like I said, is mostly older people who are aware of who Bruce Lee was. And then, in terms of the dialogue delivery, that was how he mostly talked from everything I've seen. I think it's just that what happens is for modern audiences that like any of that context, it's kind of this exaggerated speaking way. So they read it as like, oh, look at the other. They're not the same.
Yeah, but that's just racist watching a movie. You know what I mean? Like, the reason I was laughing at any of the dialogue is the way it's written, like him being cocky about Cassius Clay, and then
he's like, got the
and then
gloves
Cliff
on,
Booth. Yes, like
I mean,
it's so damn funny.
I remember reading
scenes in the movie.
and
it's not really at his expense necessarily. It's just how everything plays out.
I think it's showing
with Cliff already being on the edge of getting in trouble and then starting a fight, kind of.
With,
you know what I mean?
With like one of the biggest martial at the time, it's a good show, but he's like the guy.
And the function of that scene is like any movie.
But just when she comes out and it's her car, and then she's like, "Why did you even hire him?" And then Kurt Russell's having to be like,
and there's a whole meta level of Death Proof and everything. But again, they even talk about this in the movie of the function of this scene is, you have your kind of hero of the film or big guy beat up one of the baddest people in the movie. That's how you know he's a badass. I mean, that's the function of the scene.
Al Pacino's character talked about how the reason that Rick Dalton gets brought in to be bested by the heroes to put them over.
Yeah. So I mean, that's why Cliff's there. That's why that whole scene exists.
Well, it's funny because like if you want to compare this to wrestling, Rick Dalton was the face for a long time. He's no longer that. He's the pudding guy. He's the guy that doesn't get the entrance music. He's just arguing the ring. He gets beat.
The other thing too is,
and then he goes home
because I think some of the other stuff was like at the time when the Green Hornet was on and stuff like that. So
he keeps calling him Kato too, which is so funny.
Because Bruce Lee, I remember him. Like I do remember reading stories that he got upset when they were doing the crossover with Green Hornet and Batman. He gets bested by Robin.
Yeah,
it's like, come on, Burt Ward wearing a pair of underwear,
which I totally get. And his daughter, everything she says is completely valid. I totally get her perspective.
But it's also her dad.
Yeah, it's her dad, and she says he had to work 10 times as hard as any Rick Dalton or white actor at the time because of how thick the racism was and how hard he had to work.
And just his accent.
They relegated him to being the sidekick and all that, and he didn't get his chance until, of course, these import films started coming in.
He left the Hollywood system and then got back in.
That was all bullshit. But at the same time, man, I love Bruce Lee to death, but you know what I mean? For me, it's like this gives me a memorable performance of him that doesn't make me think any less of him.
No,
and maybe some people do, and that is maybe a problem. But it's just
But my thing is,
it's the hazard of playing fast and loose with real people.
And they're dead. They can't defend themselves. But also, it's one of those things where
if he instead,
Tarantino's not punching down. Like, Bruce Lee is nearly a god in the eyes of martial arts cinema. And it's like, you can't really do much to tarnish him. I mean, he may put a little bruise on his chin by making this film, but not much. You know what I mean?
No,
he put a dent in him, but that's it. He put a dent in the side of the car.
If you know somebody, if you actually know about Bruce Lee, but here's the thing with him is Bruce Lee was not a self-deprecating type of person. Whereas Jackie Chan is. How many times in a Jackie Chan film does... Because, there was,
Well, the difference is Jackie Chan came from an era when they made the films in China, and then they got to make the films in America. He was an established bona fide star that was given the ability to do what he wanted. He didn't have to fight and claw just to even be recognized as not a sidekick that was a joke.
Yeah, but I'm saying, but Bruce Lee was a very serious person... in his films, but I'm saying, but he was not self-deprecating at all.
And his interviews and everything, and that's why it's so funny because I did watch so many of his interviews and everything, and he's always so serious and
so let's say
he's a very dramatic person.
So what would have happened if they had made that scene play out relatively similarly, and instead of Bruce Lee was Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali that happened to be around some set? And then they got in a fight and Cliff bested him a little bit. Do you think that would cause a huge out?
See, but Cassius Clay's a different person. He intentionally antagonizes people, and he would get beat. You know what I mean? Like that was the role he played, and I think he had some. Cassius Clay had self-awareness about it.
Yeah.
He was trying to play a role, I think, where Bruce Lee maybe didn't have any self-awareness, and that's why it's funny and it works for that specific character.
But not to keep spending time on that scene,
but I mean, that's one of the things that makes this movie to me so good because
how he plays with the rules.
But that's such a memorable scene because you're always going to come back to that because it's like when you're watching this movie, you look forward to that because it's just...
It does a whole lot at once.
Yeah.
Too.
So the movie also in terms of other things. So the big divergence from history is that the movie does really rely on your knowledge of these events, especially dates and street locations and things like that. I mean, I didn't remember all the exact details. I knew that the street that Rick Dalton lived on was Sharon Tate Street because they drove by them early on in the film. And I don't remember the exact dates of when the murders occurred.
I didn't either.
But then, so that kind of, if you knew more of that, you get the ticking clock of, well, here's where things are going to go down.
But also, too, for me, I was more invested in them. I was like, okay, we know this thing is going to pop its head up. But that's okay. I'm fine.
You knew that they weren't going to bring in the Manson family and all that stuff and not have them cross paths with Cliff. Because Cliff Booth went to the ranch and interacted with...
Let's talk about that because that is a very good scene because he sees one of the hippie girls in a couple of different places. They make eye contact and she's trying to, at the time, hitchhike. And they're always kind of going different ways. So one day it just lines up where... She's hitchhiking. They're going the same direction.
And he's got a day.
He's going to the Stall Ranch or whatever.
Yeah.
Which is where they filmed the show Bounty Law. So he's like, well, I work there, and they go there anyway. And he knew the guy that owns the ranch, and he kind of sees what's going on. And at first,
the drive there, like again, more character building of like. He's not taking any risk. He got in trouble once. He got out of it. He's like he's I'm not going to jail for you.
She offers him oral sex. Yeah. And he's like, well, how old are you? And then she's like, that's the first time anyone's asked that. And she's like, I'm 18. He's like, do you have an ID to that effect? And then she does, and he's like, that's because you're not. Yeah. And then he gives a little spiel about how, they've tried to put me in prison before and didn't get me. They're not getting me for you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like this weird, honorable thing. It's like a little bit of a save the cat moment of the character doing something that's applauded. But at the same time, it's not because... His logic isn't I don't want to take advantage of somebody that is vulnerable or whatever. It's more of I don't want to get in trouble for it.
Yeah, but then you get
to different motivation. But
well, you get to the ranch, and this is where you get a bunch of little.
Well, it could go very bad. It could be a horror film almost.
I would say, but you get a bunch of cameos because you got Leah Dunham, you have Harley Quinn Smith. I mean, there's a bunch of different
Willis in there.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different people in there that are all in it. But what I like about the ranch is this is where it shifts because he was kind of like on the same side with them and they all like him but then he's like, well, where's the caretaker?
Where's George?
Yeah, where's George? And that's where it shifts.
Because this makes you love his character even more because you're like, hey, even though he knows this is kind of shifty, he's checking on him because he feels something's wrong. You know what I mean? Again, you're like, okay, he is a really good guy because he's going to stick his neck
then
out.
He goes in, and then the situation gets diffused once George is alive and does live there. And
everything
which I think that was originally going to be Burt Reynolds before he passed away. But Bruce Dern was phenomenal.
Yeah, he was great. Well,
he was so good.
Well,
I love
too,
Bruce
he's
Dern.
like, you know what? It means a lot to me that you asked about me or something. Whatever the line was, it was like really, but I'm going back to sleep. And then and that was really good.
But too, apparently that was somewhat probably based on real events. If the guy named Georgia owned the ranch,
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I mean,
like
that's
that.
they use sex in
And
order to
he's like the redheaded girl in there. He's like, how the hell am I supposed to know what color her hair is? I'm blind.
So they build up this like relation. So they build up this sequence where there is tension because you know what's going to happen because I didn't remember all the intricate details of any of this stuff. So I was like, oh, will there be this kind of action sequence? And he just comes, so he sees George and he's like, well, this is weird, but this isn't anything I have too much of a problem with.
And he's not building them up. They are not the Firefly clan. They are just weird, dirty hippies sitting there watching TV, living in filth and disgust.
So then when he goes to
not
leave,
some sort of mythic evil entity.
Yeah,
when he
it's just very weird to have everybody watch.
So when he goes to leave, the hippie guy had put a knife in his tire. So he beats the crap out of him.
Well, he asked him first, like, did you do this? And he's like, well, lucky for you, my boss keeps a spare. And
he's like, so change it.
Yeah.
And the guy,
he gives him a chance.
Yeah.
So then he beats the crap out of the guy. And then they go off to get the other guy, Tex, who is one of the more like ringleaders.
And he's
actually
actually involved in the murders.
But by the time Tex gets back, the tire's been changed and Cliff's already leaving. So like you have that. But then like the big twist in terms of the main thing that everybody's wondering is how they're going to handle it in this movie. If they just do a brutalized version of the murder of a pregnant woman, and
that's
all this
what
stuff,
I was worried about.
Then the movie to me would just leave a sour taste in somebody's mouth.
But before we get to that, we do need to talk about the Sharon Tate movie scene. So we kind of talked a little bit.
So they show in the movie they show her watching the movie with the real Sharon
The
Tate,
Wrecking Ball.
And that's where I think it may have been confusing to people to some extent if they weren't super aware of what the movie setup was and who everybody was. But I did think that with her character, ultimately they paid homage to her
because it's a very sweet scene because she,
gets to enjoy the movie with an audience.
She's a budding star at the time. She's not, she's not like a Marilyn Monroe type where everybody knows her. She's not. She's an up and comer, so she can still have a little bit of anonymity. Yeah. So she goes to the theater, and she's like, "Well, I'm the one in the movie." And then the woman doing the tickets, like, "Oh, really?" And then that's a really nice, sweet scene where she gets to take a picture.
She just wants to be recognized and kind of, be like, okay, I am somebody. It's not about the 75 cents.
Yeah,
or
it's not about the money. She just wants to like.
Oh, I'm in this.
Yeah, I'm in this. That's me. And then she goes in the theater. And then she puts the glasses on. I don't know if maybe to disguise herself or maybe she just needs them. But
I think she needs them.
But it's just a really nice scene because it's like, oh, she's normal. Like most people, given the opportunity, would probably want to do that just to see how people react. Well, and they're all reacting positively to all the stuff that she did in the movie that's funny or her fight scene. Like, it was just...
Again, there didn't need to be any dialogue and all that stuff, but it was such a great scene, and it showed her character. And she's apparently loved movies and loved making movies. And Tarantino is a big fan of Hollywood, obviously, and that's what this whole film is about. Everybody there working because they want to work and they love the movies. And before that, too, she got the book that apparently she gave a gift to Polanski, who he later turned into a film.
Yeah. And then, so you have like that stuff. And then earlier in the film, when Polanski and Tate go to a party at the Playboy Mansion, it's all tasteful. Like there's nothing exploitive there either. So I think they gave her character like reverence and
she's having a good time. I mean,
she's having a good time.
Being at the prime party place probably of that era,
and just
what I mean.
It came across as like, okay, I have no problems with what they represented here at this of our film. Now, the big part is, well, how does it end? And the way it ended was kind of like revisionist history, wish fulfillment.
Oh,
stuff.
just like Inglourious Basterds, very similar.
So the idea is
it's
that
a Hollywood ending.
So
basically.
when the killers come up the street and they're outside of the Tate house because they were going to go in there because that was where like a former music producer lived. Blah blah blah.
And let's not gloss over this story. This is after they come back from Italy. They made 4 pictures. Rick is not going to have money anymore because
he got married
to support Cliff because his career is he doesn't know where his career is going to be at selling the house. They go out to party, so they're already drunk. They go back to the house. Cliff finally
he bought an acid dip
smoking the acid dip cigarette on the walk, and Rick is of course still making drinks and making margaritas
because he has and the dog is there guarding his
hanging out with him
because he didn't
was it
his dog's he's taking his dog for a walk.
He takes the dog for a walk,
and there's a lot of things that set up. So you set up the flamethrower that Rick Dalton used in that film that he trained a lot with.
Actually,
I'm setting it up.
Okay.
You set up that Cliff feeds his dog out of these huge ass cans of dog food. You set up that his dog is very well behaved and does exactly what he asks. And then you set up that he's using this acid dip cigarette and that him and Rick are both drunk off their ass.
Yeah. And then actually one of the best scenes in the movie, there's 2 scenes with DiCaprio specifically. It's just brilliant. When he's on the set of the where he's doing
Yeah, I mean, we
the
skipped over
cameo.
so many great
He
things,
just has a mental breakdown in this trailer. He's like, "You goddamn drunk! You had to drink 8 whiskey sours instead of 4." Keg. And he's like throwing stuff.
And he's like,
He's like, I'm
threatens-
quitting tomorrow. And then he grabs his drink.
He's like, "I'm like,
and he threatens, if you do it again, I'll kill you.
yeah," and then he drinks.
And there's that meta scene where he's explaining the story to the little girl. You know, and the whole thing
which
about
is
the film
him.
is she's like, it's okay if you never get 100%. You just got to give 100%.
Yeah.
And then basically he recounts the story of the guy who breaks his hip.
The
and he's not
Bronco
as good-
Buster.
Yeah, and
then-
he's crying and everything.
But then you have
Beautiful.
the actual 4 people that commit the murders. They pull up and they're in this like old
Beater
50s
car.
Chevy that's really loud. And he's making a margarita, and he hears
Pissed
them,
off.
and it pisses him off. So he goes outside in the bathrobe with a full pitcher of margarita, and it's like, "You dirty hippies!"
Giving him like an
It's-
entitled rant.
Oh, yeah,
He's like,
just
I live
like-
on a private road.
Yeah, this
Just
is not for
hear
you all. And then like intimidates them to leave.
And then takes a drink out of it afterwards.
As he's walking off.
And they're about the shooting too. You don't know
Now,
if that's the way it's going to go.
Do you all remember? Did you recognize the woman who fled?
That was she was on Stranger Things season
It's
3.
Maya
Mia
Hawke.
Hawke.
It was Uma Thurman's and Ethan
Yeah,
Hawke's
Uma-
daughter.
So they have a
She was
lot
in
of
this
people.
movie, but I
yeah.
didn't recognize it too.
Yeah, so you have the scene. So after he goes and intimidates them off, they go back to the bottom of the hill and park the car. She, they're gonna walk up the hill. She's like, "Oh, I forgot my knife." So she gets in the
Yeah.
car and leaves.
But before that, they all have a discussion like, we should just kill. They changed their minds
because they were
going
going to kill everybody that lived in the house that Sharon Tate was
Yeah,
in.
but since he did that, they piss him off.
They said, oh, since he's on TV showing people to kill, let's kill him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the people that taught us to kill, let's kill
So
them.
they go to his house
Again, which is commentary on violence, and it's
And-
always been a huge debate, even around Tarantino's
when
films.
when they get there to kill him, Brad Pitt and his dog had just gotten back from the walk, going in the back way.
He's feeding the dog.
And now our hero is vastly at a disadvantage.
'Cause he
you know what I
is-
mean? Like
he has
you've been
used
waiting
this-
for him film to really mess somebody up, and now he's at a disadvantage.
he's
he smoked
drunk and then he's high on acid.
Yeah, so he's drunk and on acid, and the people bust in the door, and he's got the dog food still in his hand, and the dog's sitting on the couch, and he tells the dog not to move. And then the guys
And
kind
if
of
he
go.
hadn't trained his dog yet, his
Yeah.
dog would have already been eating and not been able to help out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Plus,
Like,
but there's an entire scene too where like they're going through and he doesn't realize it's real.
He's like, "Are you
'Cause
real?"
He's like, "Are you real?" And then he goes on and which he says the actual line that they say he said when
like,
he
I'm here to
committed-
do the devil's work.
Yeah,
or
I mean, he's
whatever.
like, "That's a goddamn dumbest thing I've ever heard."
no, he said, "What's your name?" And he says, "I'm the devil. I'm here to do the devil's work." He said, "No, it's something
Yeah,
dumber than that."
something- yeah.
And then
He's
somebody
like,
says,
"Rex?"
"Tex." He said, "Yeah, Tex. That's
Yeah,
it."
I recognize you.
Because at first he's like Rex, and then they're like, "Oh, he recognizes
But
all
it
this."
deflates that line that, of course, plenty of people I'm sure worship. You know what I
Wait,
mean? About,
there's
like,
a very
oh, it's
similar
so
line,
scary
'cause
and
it
creepy.
shows-
Rob Zombie used that line,
and it's all like mystifies them, but he deflates that and takes that power away from them.
because he's like, "You're just a dirty hippie," and then
Yes.
But
so
then what kind
once-
of snaps him into reality is when they grab Rick's wife and bring her in, and then that's kind of when it's like, oh, this is real.
So then that's when he lets the dog go into action.
Oh,
It
yeah.
takes the
Oh,
gun.
it's so great.
It takes Tex out, or takes the gun off of Tex and is ripping into his crotch.
Yeah.
And then the other female murderer
Charges at him, he throws-
She charges with the knife. He throws the huge heavy can of dog food into her face and like busts her nose.
up. Yeah.
And then the
Rick
other.
Dalton's in the pool with his headphones on.
Yeah, he's unaware of everything that's
So
going
then
on.
the other female, the other one then
So-
gets into an altercation with Rick Dalton's wife.
Because she punches him, so she has
Yeah,
a
because
little
Rick
bit.
Dalton's wife punches her and knocks her over the couch or chair.
Runs
Everybody
off.
was cheering at that too.
Yeah.
So then,
Because they've all had probably enough training just being in movies and they'll probably throw a punch.
because I'm trying to remember, because I know that so then the other girl attacks Cliff with her knife and stabs him in the leg.
No. Before that,
Well, he beats the girl's face all over the place.
before that happened. Before any of that, he kicks Cliff or he kicks Tex in the leg, breaks it, stomps him
his
in the
head.
chest, and then splatters his head drive style in the doorway. That's after the dog like ripped his junk off and chewed his arm up.
And then
the dog is while that's happening attacking the redhead.
Mm-hmm.
And then so
No, it's attacking the girl that gets the gun, who then flees out of the house.
yes, that's right. Anyway, then
The redhead attacks him, and he busts her
him
face.
Well, he stabs him in the leg, and then he grabs her by the hair of the head and just
beats
starts
her up all over the
smashing
house.
it into
So
everything.
the thing I've seen complaints about the violence against women in that is because the angle in that is because they have not. It's enjoyable because of what they actually did in reality, not what they did in the film. And for me, while I was watching it, it's very brutal and it's over the top. One, being Tarantino, that is just
him.
That's just a cinematic. You know, if you like seeing violence on screen, that's him delivering on that. And
But it's
some
very,
people don't.
But it's very Three Stooge-esque.
Yes, it is. It is.
You know.
But and so honestly, the way I was processing it, it was so over the top, and I was thinking, oh, this does seem like, you know, if somebody was very angry, if they did just kill somebody, I could see him doing that. They hadn't killed anybody yet, but one, he's probably got adrenaline going through his veins, at least somewhat. But two, he's still on acid and drunk. He may not be fully aware of how over the top
and
he's
two,
been.
he already encountered them and knew that something was up.
Yes, yeah.
But two, like what
Yeah,
kills
he's been
me
stabbed
is
in the
like,
leg, all that. Like, you know, he may have just been like, I got to make sure she's dead because I've been stabbed in the leg.
Yeah.
And people are in danger. I get people, if they don't want to see violence against women and they, you know, there was an article about how they have PTSD over that.
But I mean, like,
totally get that. But for me, it all felt like it worked in the context of
because
the film.
nothing he did to either of the people he fought was any more or less violent than the way he did the Tex. He just smashed his
But
head.
yeah, so
into
then
nothing.
the other element is after the character that, you know, the dark-haired character, after she gets the gun and shoots it off in the air and like
The dog runs
she
off.
falls out of the sliding glass door to the pool that Rick is in, where he's wearing his
Cliff
headphones.
is passed out at this point.
Yeah, because Cliff
Yeah.
pats out, I guess, because of blood loss and
Yeah.
adrenaline fading out. So she falls out in the pool. Rick sees what's going on, takes the headphones off and the boombox, and
He's
jumps out of the
walking
pool.
around. He's walking around.
So he gets out of the pool as she's just like kind of sitting there shooting the gun, goes into the shed next to the pool and comes back out with the flamethrower from that movie and then burns her to a crisp.
Yeah.
And like, so just so over the top, it's hard to believe.
And you know, that's the thing about, I mean, even if you haven't succeeded 100%, at least you gave 100% to, you know,
Yeah.
both of them really. Like Cliff, he made a point to say, that's really me. I decided to really train. They didn't use a stunt double for it. He wanted to really do the flamethrower, so he trained for it. You know, we even see a little sequence of him training him saying, that's hot. Can you turn that heat down? They're like, no, it's a flamethrower.
Yeah.
But like, he at least was giving it 100% at the job he had when he was kind of at the height of his powers.
Yeah.
And because of that, at least he tried in life and you know, things kind of worked out. They don't always work out, but this is once upon a time in Hollywood. It's a Hollywood
But
ending.
I think too, though, for me, and I've read different things, but and hear me out. The ending of this movie, to me, in one way, was kind of cathartic
Oh, absolutely.
because like it's just nice to see the pieces of garbage get what they should have got.
well, just
Yeah.
it's what
And
you
it
wanted to
doesn't-
see. It's what I wanted to see in The Devil's Rejects. It's what
Yes.
I want to see in all those types of movies. Because a lot of times the filmmakers are coming at from the perspective of these are the outsiders that society doesn't treat well, and I identify with the outsiders who make their own family because blah 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 blah. And it's like, shut up. And this movie's like, nope.
And there's something to be said about these women being taken advantage of and
Oh, yeah,
their
I mean,
upbringing, all that for sure. But
What they
again,
did was
they were supposed
horrific.
to be representations also. Of
And then
just,
they also broke in, and I've seen people go, well, they didn't commit the murder yet. Yeah, but they broke
They
in
had a
somebody's
gun,
house
yeah.
with a gun and knives, and they were going to murder
Their
them.
intent.
Just the dog. If the dog wasn't there, they probably wouldn't
Yeah.
make it. But it's like, I have no sympathy for them because of what they actually did.
Because
in real life.
because you know when you know what they actually did, they killed. It wasn't 4 people; it was like 5 people brutally,
Yeah.
and then wrote with blood on the door and stuff. And
And then they committed more murders the next
They
night.
killed a woman who was 8 months pregnant, and then they committed more murders the following day. So people that are trash, and so if you didn't have that knowledge, but at the same time, like when they have the different states that have like the weapons training classes you have to take before you can get a concealed carry license or whatever, they always say if somebody breaks into your house, shoot to kill. Because if you leave someone alive, they can hurt you and or sue you because of the way most laws work. So granted, this wasn't about that type of stuff. This was just really about wish fulfillment and kind of, you know, so if this movie...
him being in a war, you don't know what you know what I mean? His instincts may have kicked in. Of like, hey,
you saw,
this is kill or be killed.
you saw early on that he stood toe-to-toe with Bruce Lee, who was
Yeah.
an incredibly fast, dangerous fighter.
Well, then he stood down too, like the entire clan at one point when he's
Yeah.
at
And
the
he wasn't
ranch.
intimidated, but yeah, so you have the element of, you know, if anybody's upset about that brutality at the end, the opposite version of that, playing that story out like the truth, would involve one of those women stabbing to death a pregnant woman. So, I
Yeah.
mean, what's the alternative? So, yes, it is bad that people who were taken advantage of and brainwashed became cult members, but at a certain point, you can't identify with someone once they're so far gone, they will never course
For me,
correct.
it's almost like, you can say, hey, you may feel some sympathy in some regards looking at it at a certain angle, but... And maybe the violence is over the top and is not your thing, that's fine. But for me, it's almost just like people making bad decisions leading to bad. It's almost like a Coen Brothers film, like Fargo. Like, hey, this person may have not done something super bad, but they made a bad decision and it led to a grisly end for them or something. You know what I mean? Like, they just made bad decisions on deciding to go in the house and murder those people, and that was the unfortunate outcome for them. That they got brutally,
because they
destroyed.
They picked a house with a capable individual inside of it. Even though he was drunk and under the influence of drugs, he still.
But he had a dog who very much was not.
Yeah. So like and then I heard like PETA obviously had an issue with it because of the dog, and they're talking about
because the representation of the dog was that it bore the typical physical appearance of a dog used for fighting, and it did the brutality at the end.
Here's my thing: is like.
I mean, if you replace it with a Rottweiler or a German Shepherd, does it play much different?
Or a Jack Russell. I mean,
not a Jack Russell.
The mask, the dog kills people with a mask
you're talking
on.
about the mask.
but it's that level of cartoonish violence that happens in this. Like,
I mean, if the dog was a collie, there's all kinds of dogs you could have swapped it out with, and there wouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah.
I don't know. They may have had a problem with the dog. I mean, but here's the thing. Cops have the German Shepherds. They train to do that. I mean,
well, my thing is like I own dogs and I love dogs a lot, but
as long as the dog was treated well on set.
Yeah, but I think everybody who owns a dog would love for their dog to be able to do that if they ever needed it to. So like, yes, I love my dogs. I don't want anything to ever happen to them.
So I think at the end of the day, so the movie is
and so after that too, it's the kind of the end of the film is he the whole time he's hoping to work with Roman Polanski, thinking that could jumpstart his career. Well. After Cliff goes off and, Cliff says, I'll be fine. Come visit me in the morning. Bring me donuts. That's kind of them saying goodbye.
Bagels or whatever.
Yeah, bagels or whatever. And, he's like, go in there and lay naked with your wife. And he's like, she's passed out. You guys are going to have to come back and wake her up.
But see, I think too, like, to me, that was the showing that the friendship wasn't going to end.
Yes,
Because I think,
for sure.
going into that, they both kind of recognized, like, oh, this is the end of an era.
Yeah.
We're kind of done. We're going to move on. But then this happens, and it's like, no.
And so after that, Emil Hirsch comes out, which was, Tate's hairdresser that she was with and kind of maybe still with a little bit, even though she was married to Polanski. He comes out and then basically he gets invited up, and Sharon Tate, her voice comes over the thing. And, it's just a surreal moment. You know what I mean? Knowing like, hey, this is her voice. She still exists in this world.
So she's still alive. And by some, kind of random chance, Rick Dalton may get a chance to star in a Polanski film or have his star improved because, like Burt Reynolds and Steve McQueen and a number of people did kind of TV kind of work and foreign films and stuff that they weren't super huge stars, and then they had a second act of their career in which they became huge. Because, Burt Reynolds, Smokey and the Bandit and all this stuff became a huge star.
And then his stuntman directed what? Hooper? The movie where Burt Reynolds plays a stuntman. His former stuntman directed that movie and stuff. So
you have all this
you could see that him being in Chinatown or something, taking over Jack Nicholson, and kind of his career going on, and him and Cliff able to still work together.
And you have all these kind of circular things, and two, you have like the 14 Fist of something that
McCluskey. 14 Fists of McCluskey.
That was a Leo, the film that Rick Dalton was in. That was like a World War II flick that could have like. He's like, did anybody ask for some fried sauerkraut? And when he used the flamethrower, and that could have almost been like a fake trailer from Grindhouse or something.
And two, another like wonderful scene is, I think he picks him up, I guess, from the day he visits the Manson Ranch. Cliff does. He says, "Hey, my episode of what was on
the FBI?
Was it FBI?
Yeah, and they both sit there and watch.
Yeah,
it.
And just the commentary of them talking about it, and then apparently that was the episode Burt Reynolds was really in.
Yeah,
he played that role, but just them talking about like, oh man, I love that shot there when he comes in the window and it's all shattered.
Like, oh, you got both of them.
I love that. Like you could they just feel like real friends in this, and they just love movies and they love watching them. And Cliff's like there to, from the opening line of the film, and he said, what's your job? He's like, I'm here just to carry his load, and that's the whole film. He's like the emotionally and supportive person that also takes care of him and everything. But he's happy with that role because that's still his buddy, and he's got his back as well. And so don't see any films like that.
And two,
you always have the movies where they have like they
got to have a fallout.
I would like to know too, like what Tarantino his headcanon is for whether or not Cliff killed his wife or not. Because if it wasn't, and it was an accident,
I think he didn't.
I mean, because I think the movie wouldn't glorify him to that extent.
No, I didn't expect Tarantino to glorify these murders, even though he has this extreme moments of violence and everything. I feel like he always at least has sympathy, and it, he's always on the side of righteousness and revenge. Even just Pulp Fiction. them two coming to terms when they're in the basement with a gimp. You know what I mean? Like there's some revenge there, you know, with Kill Bill. Like you find out her daughter's not dead. You know what I mean? Like he's not there for the torture porn. If this would have been Eli Roth's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I don't know how this would end it. You know what I mean? But Tarantino, he's always, honestly, to me, been a little soft. You know what I mean? And I mean that in a good way. I don't mean that in a bad way. Even though he has extreme moments of violence and he has fun with it, that's the giddiness of it.
Well, I don't know, in The Hateful Eight, I would say there was anything soft because it ended with two men who were mortally wounded bonding over hanging a woman.
No, but that felt very much I don't know. That film felt a little different than some of his other ones. And Django was, both those are pretty brutal films. But I'm just saying, in general, sometimes people that a lot of times people get what they deserve in his films, and usually the completely innocent ones never really are victims that much. It may be somebody, even in Reservoir Dogs, you know, he walks in to go undercover. He knows the risks there. You know what I mean? Like he's never had anybody be a victim just to be a victim before that I can think of. It's always been people, if they're involved in crime or they're involved in something, they've taken that risk, and that may be part of the game for them.
It's like even with Inglourious Bastards, when the actress gets killed by
Hans Landa.
Like she is an innocent person, but
she's working for the greater good.
She's working for the greater good. But she, like you said,
she put herself in that situation. Yeah. And she, you know, she made that decision, and that was, you know, what she thought. You know, she thought that was very well could be a possibility at any point of that mission.
Well, too, that just showed like Hans Landa let the other Americans live because he knew that he could get. He just basically said like, oh, somebody who's on my side betrayed us. I'm going to take vengeance out.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go make a deal to save myself, seeing where this is ultimately going to go. But like, yeah, I mean, so like the ending of the movie was kind of wish fulfillment, and it's how I'd like a lot of horror movies to end, because like, I guess it just says a lot about your world viewpoint. Just like
as I get older, I more want happy endings, but you know, I don't think that's a great horror film necessarily all the time. Like that's just more of a.
It's like,
I'm just saying all of the Texas Chainsaw knockoff movies or the whatever movies where it wants, like especially the Rob Zombie ones, they wanted you to identify with the Firefly clan, and basically say like, oh, it's an outcast family who, you know, came together and blah blah blah.
I mean, to be fair though, we thought that they did die at the end of Rejects. You know what I mean?
And then too, the trailer for 3 from Hell is out. It like. We'll probably talk about it. I mean, it looks like it's just trying to recreate the magic of Devil's Rejects,
which
on a fifth of the budget,
like,
maybe.
Devil's Rejects was good, but again, like with this though, it's like it just, to me, like I said, it felt very cathartic. It's just kind of like you know, you don't get this in a lot of movies. You never really have somebody who is like a capable individual that goes against people. Like, and obviously he's much more capable than people that were going against him.
And if you had played this out a little bit, like if you were to play out and have the movie last a few more days, like what was the cultural impact on Hollywood if they stopped the Manson murders from ever occurring? Because they killed the 4 people, or the 4 people got taken out who then committed the murder the next day. So
all that would follow.
And he knew where the ranch was at.
Knew where the ranch was at. So would that have unraveled all that before it became a big thing? And Manson had just been in prison.
I just love that scene when he's laying there and you know he's alive and he's talking to the police.
Yeah.
And he's like, he said something about being the devil. I don't know. That's not verbatim. Like he's trying to recount what he said. So it's funny if his message got muddled that way. That line would never be part of history and be almost iconic like it is. You know what I mean? It would be funny through his filter of being like, we don't really know what they said, and it's not glorified.
This is just an FU to Charles Manson, a little bit. But real quick before we finish the podcast, I talked about earlier, I'd read the Wikipedia about this movie before it came out. Now, you can probably go find where somebody had maybe talked about this or screenshot it, but it's a vastly different ending than what this is. Because this one, while it is extremely violent, I feel like, it sounds weird, it was done in a tasteful way. Like, I didn't come out of this being like, ugh, you know. Now, the other ending, which I still, I guess, have a problem with, was that what I'd read in the Wikipedia ending, and in the movie they wrote, it was much different, but apparently, like, it kind of ends with the final confrontation either at the Tate's house or the ranch. I can't really remember. But either way,
Bruce Lee.
But they get there, and, like, Cliff and Rick go to intervene, and Bruce Lee's already there, and he's like, well, I've been watching them, and you know, I knew that something weird was going on, so I'm gonna take them on. So it would be like you have Rick Dalton, you have Cliff Booth, and you'd also have Bruce Lee fighting, and then Sharon Tate was also involved, where she kills some of the members of the family, and then Charles Manson shows up, and I think they shoot him in the head with a shotgun or something, and then Cliff dies. So it's a vastly different.
And you could believe that in a Tarantino film.
And I read that, and I was like, I don't know if I love this, but I think that I've got enough assurance. It's like, oh, okay, this isn't going where I thought it was going to go. I'll watch it.
Well, because they didn't give any lip service to the Manson family. They didn't glorify them.
Well, they have. I think there's only one actual part of the movie that even has Charles Manson in it, and it's a very.
He's in it for a brief amount of time.
Yeah,
and so yes, I guess,
and it basically is. It almost has to be there to set up why they was targeted to that house. I mean, they don't go into like him wanting a music career, and I guess the music producer used to live there. They don't go into that or anything. They just know that he's been in that house before, and
so
he's sending them there.
So what if the movie ended of like before they go into the house and before the Manson family goes in the house and tries to kill people, Ringo, Paul, and John Lennon and George Harrison show up. It's like, we heard people talking about Helter Skelter. We're going to stop this right now. And then they just like beat him to death with guitars and stuff.
Well, that'd be a vastly
it's like a scary movie version of Tarantino universe.
It's one of the guitars from was it was it Renegade or no the second Desperado.
Yeah, just
or was it Desperado or Once Upon a Mexico or
it's Once Upon a I think
he
both.
has the guitar that shoots, so it shows the Beatles like Helter Skelter.
Write that movie that way.
Well, I think like that's kind of the point. Is like what happened if that didn't happen? Because then you just have a huge shift in culture, and it'd be probably a different world for a while. Of course, something would probably still happen, but it just would be a lot different. Yeah. And in this world, the Mansons that clan never existed like it does in ours. So.
Yeah, walking out of the theater too, I heard much older couple, like two ladies, I think, talking to each other, and one of them said like, "I wished it would have happened that way." Again, it's like this wish fulfillment of like, it's. I don't know. It's like you've never seen a tribute film like this to somebody before. It's such a very different type of film, and just in all regards, I really loved it.
Given that, and if you go back and listen to our podcast, people know my intense hatred for the Hateful Eight. My wife fell asleep within like 20 minutes of it, and it was just not a movie I enjoyed. This is, I think, vastly superior. Probably definitely my favorite movie of the year. I think it's been very hard to top. I don't personally see anything coming out because like even though you still have like Star Wars and Terminator, this is just such a vastly different film from that I just see it being hard to top.
Yeah, I mean, ninth film from Tarantino. We only get so many of these. He mentioned 10 and done possibly. He said that could always change. But I saw one comment, I haven't seen any more, about him saying, I don't know, maybe this one could be my final one. And you could honestly see this being a good note to go out on because it is about the changing of the old guard and all that. And then,
like he's also mentioned maybe last film, maybe doing some TV or series stuff because Netflix and all that stuff today is so prevalent and kind of gives you full control if you're a creator that has a track record and a name.
But this to me would be you made something really amazing, and you could
and it's just I don't know. I feel it's appropriate. Like a personally, an appropriately personal film too. You know what I mean? About Rick Dalton getting older and whatever, and he's always worried about getting older and his
it's a nostalgic film and
So I really enjoyed this film.
Yeah.
We're gonna do a rating.
Sure.
Yeah. What you wanna go with?
What would you give it out of 10?
I'm going 10 out of 10. Like I said, it's my favorite movie of the year so far. I don't see anything coming out to change that. Going into the film, anybody listened to the podcast previously, I wasn't hyped up for this. I wasn't, I mainly watch it because we were covering it on the podcast. And then I come out like, man, that was definitely one of my favorites in a long time.
Yeah, I give it 10 out of 10 too. I wasn't walking out. I was like, I really loved it, but I was like, I'm not for sure where I land on it. And I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to like watching this over and over because like everybody I like hangout films like that. You don't see characters like this of those two characters. Really, I mean, that's why I'm going to come back to this is their relationship and just seeing those two characters and just some great like Brad Pitt's performance and Leo DiCaprio. We've talked a lot about him, but Brad Pitt and this for me was just so phenomenal and so great and just so funny the entire time. And just feel very effortless. You know what I mean in his performance, and Leonardo DiCaprio had amazing performance too, but he really had to work at his a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying because of lack of talent, but just he was giving a lot of different things he had to do. But Cliff just felt like this guy who was just going through life and accepting whatever came to him, and but also too, seemed a guy that drank a lot and ate mac and cheese a lot, and he looked like that. When did he have time to lift weights?
I guess it was leaving out his 10 hours a day in the gym. So, like, in terms of me, like, I don't know. Like, I think if a few things are handled differently, to me, it'd be a 10 out of 10, but as it is, like, an 8. I mean, it could go up or down, because it is a movie I've left thinking about more after seeing it.
I mean, yeah,
like
Tarantino's
Midsommar
films-
did that, too, where I left it being like, but then afterwards I've thought about it more, and I like it more.
Yeah, and you saw it just yesterday, too.
Yeah, I saw it yesterday.
See, I had more days
about a
to
day
process
and a half
it,
out later, I was like, okay, yeah, I think this solidified for me.
Yeah, it took me. I loved it when I came out of it, but to me, a movie that leaves lasting impact is one I think about a lot.
And Jackie Brown, when I watched that in the 90s, or whenever it came out, I had seen Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, so I was like, all right, Tarantino's new film, but it is not that at all. You know what I mean? It is not.
Yeah, it's his movie that benefits the most from time.
Yeah, and somebody said like that feels like a film that was made later in his career, where it almost feels closer to this, and like we don't have all these spurts of genre action and stuff. It is very much that one also is not originally his. It's at least somewhat based on a Elmore Leonard novel, but heavily adapted from what I've read. But definitely check out that, Derek. If you haven't seen Jackie Brown, check that out, because that is a film that takes its time. But that film, my whole point was that film, when I first saw it, I was like, oh yeah, I liked it, but that was fine. But over the years, probably part of me getting a little bit older too, and not knowing what to expect out of it, like that's one of my favorite Tarantino films now as well. That's great. But this is almost like his influence from that, and everything else he's done coming to a head, and his just love for Hollywood and cinema, and just I think he knocked it out of the park with this movie.
Yep, so that'll wrap up our discussion of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If you're enjoying the podcast, do us a huge favor and leave a review wherever you're listening. We always enjoy seeing comments and things on YouTube. Get some good commentary there. You can always send us an email at podcast@housebyvideostore.com. Find links to all of our social media accounts at the website, House by Video Store. Find all of our videos and such. Find everything on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all those different places.
HouseByTheVideoStore.com.
Yeah, if you want to see us specifically on the internet, you can see me on Instagram at the William Caps.
Found me on Twitter and Instagram at CapsDerek.
And I'm at Blevin Sean on Twitter.
And that'll wrap up this episode of the House by Video Store podcast. Thanks for listening.